Violent riots last night at the University of California at Berkeley. You watched them break out live on this show last evening. The man who made that campus tremble joins us tonight in the studio for his first interview following the outbreak of violence. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Few people are hated more by the left than Milo Yiannopoulos, the gay Jewish immigrant who's become the face of the red-pilled right. Evidence of that was on full display last night at Berkeley, where Milo was scheduled to speak, but was evacuated shortly before the speech for his own safety. Watch what happened. That was America last night. Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos joins us for his first interview since we spoke with him by phone last night. Milo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So here's the reason I want to talk to you. It's not to endorse your views, many of which I agree with, some of which I don't. But the point is, you tried to express your views and were prevented by a violent mob. So if you were an anarchist or a Scientologist or a flat earth activist, it wouldn't matter. You were not allowed to exercise your First Amendment rights, and that's shocking. Give us first a quick recap of what happened last night to you.
Well, I think I agree with you in the first place. I mean, I'm not any of the things that these posters characterize me as in an effort to legitimize the violence. But even if I were, I don't think it would matter for the reasons you say. So I went in to do my talk. We go in a couple of hours before to set up our tech and for me to, put on a costume or something. I had a wonderful outfit plan, which is the main reason I'm upset about yesterday. I was going to go as a native. I was going to talk about cultural appropriation in full Native American headdress. I had a full custom headdress with my name embroidered on it. I'm so mad that I didn't get to wear that. Anyway, we went in for like an hour or two beforehand. We were planning it, and suddenly there were these explosions outside. There were firecrackers and rocks being hurled at the building. The police were having things hurled at them, and I was evacuated up to the 5th floor, like by the fire escape. It was all very exciting. And then suddenly, I was being taken out of the building. I was informed that I was being evacuated because there were hundreds of protesters outside, blowing things up, hurling things at the police. The police didn't seem to me to be doing very much aside from hiding inside the building. The ground floor had been stormed, so we had to rush down to the parking lot, find one car, and that exit was blocked, so we ran to another car, and we finally got in one, and I was, bundled in, put in a bulletproof vest, and whisked away. And that is the price you pay for being a libertarian or a conservative on American college campuses.
So what's so striking is I have no doubt the average police officer does not sympathize with a mob like that. I just have no doubt about it. But the truth is they did not come to your defense in a meaningful way. The video proves it. You're affirming it now. Why?
Well, we don't know for absolutely sure, but one thing I can tell you is that the mayor of Berkeley, who was sort of gleefully egging this stuff on yesterday, who today had to apologize for the usual leftist name calling of me today.
What did he say about you?
Well, the usual slurs, this white supremacist speaker. I mean, please, anyone who's spent 5 seconds in my company or 2 seconds in my bedroom knows I'm not a white supremacist. But this usual slurs that they wheel out in a sort of effort to legitimize violence against you. They want to call you the worst possible name. It's like the punch a Nazi thing, right? Well, I could imagine a reasonable person being taken some way along the argument of like it's okay to punch Nazis, but the problem is that the left calls everyone Nazis. So basically, they can punch anybody. Wait a second,
isn't it Nazis who do the punching? Isn't that what separates Nazis from the rest of us? They don't tolerate dissent, but civilized people do.
You would think so. I mean, when my book was announced, of course, there were people saying they were going to burn it while calling me the fascist. I mean, this is the sort of irony the progressive left in America doesn't seem to appreciate. But the real problem is this name calling, because as grateful as I am to be on the show and I like the attention, the real people that I want to hear from are the guys who run CNN, who are legitimizing ordinary conservatives being called white supremacists, anti-Semites, racist, sexist when they're not. There's an inevitable, obvious consequence to this.
I obviously have an interest in this because I don't anymore work at that network, so I don't even want to affirm what you just said, but I have to because it's true. Now, here is a tweet that they sent out, and I'm quoting. Yeah. This is from a CNN Twitter feed. Extremist Milo Yiannopoulos, whose Berkeley event sparked protests, takes on the college establishment and rallies white supremacists. That's from the CNN Twitter feed. I mean, is any of that true?
No, I mean, it beggars belief. I mean, it just beggars belief.
But the subtext is you deserve it.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And these people must be held to account. You know, the media has created this environment in which it's okay to say almost anything about somebody who is, you know, right of Jane Fonda. You know, if you have slightly conservative or even libertarian points of view, especially if you are persuasive and charismatic and funny and effective, like we both are, you will get called the most appalling things. And it's a way of legitimizing, in some cases, as happened last night, violent responses.
But what I find so striking about this is that it should not be a left-right debate. Because all Americans, as their birthright, have the right enshrined in the Bill of Rights to say what they think is true, period. And yet, I checked extensively, and so did our staff today, to find liberals defending you. I found one with an Arnold Lloyd defense. It was Peter Beinart. Peter Beinart at The Atlantic, who is a sincere and principled liberal, defended you.
Yeah.
The rest did not, and some, in fact, seem to endorse the violence against you that squelched your speech.
Well, they're in a bind, aren't they? Because if you come out against it and you condemn it, you're sort of saying there's something wrong with your own side. You're saying that something we have done has created an environment in which it's okay to physically attack the guests. I mean, you know, let's be completely clear. There's this attempt to paint what happened last night as the destruction of property and as sort of, you know, as protest. It wasn't. It was violent rioting in which people were physically assaulted, people were bleeding, people were beaten. You know, all sorts of things happened to people who just showed up, not all of whom were fans of mine, but just who wanted to come and just listen to what I had to say. You know, and those people were attacked, physically attacked, right? This is political violence in response to perfectly mainstream opinion. And what CNN and other networks like that want to do is suggest that there's something otherworldly or sinister or nefarious about me to legitimize the bad behavior on their own side.
But even if there is something otherworldly or sinister or nefarious about you, you still have a right, an absolute right, to express your political views, do you not?
Sure.
I mean, at what point...
But it makes it particularly ridiculous when, you know, I don't say, as even New York Magazine admitted today, anything that is outside of the mainstream of, let's say, of any typical Trump voter. I don't have opinions that, you know, millions of Americans don't share. You know, I just happen to say them in a slightly more provocative and interesting way and on a slightly larger platform.
So just to give, I mean, I can give 1,000 examples. This is the New York Times headline over the story about what happened last night. This is today. Berkeley cancels Milo Yiannopoulos' speech and Donald Trump tweets outrage. No mention of the fact that you were shut down by a mob, and this is the first line. A speech by the divisive right-wing writer Milo Yiannopoulos, University of California, Berkeley,
they're trying to insinuate. I mean, Bloomberg did the same thing. They said Milo Yiannopoulos sparks riots. You know, I was like, hang on a second now. What are they trying to insinuate?
So where's this heading exactly?
Well, I feel actually more optimistic about this than probably most conservatives because, you know, I've been on more college campuses, I think, than anybody else in America for the last 12 months as part of my tour, and I have seen a change in atmosphere. I've seen conservatives becoming more emboldened and happier. I have seen also huge numbers of alumni changing their positions on whether or not they're going to support their old schools. I mean, Missouri, when they kind of pandered to race baiters, they discovered they lost, you know, $30, $40 million in alumni donations, and enrollment went down so much they had to close 2 dorms. You know this.
Yes.
This is going to start happening all over America. And my view is, you know, that the American higher education market, and it is a market, is going to fix this because schools are going to have to pick. Either they go the direction of the University of Chicago and they say, you know what, don't apply here if you want safe spaces and trigger warnings. This is a place you come to be challenged. This is a place you come to expose yourself to people you think that you're going to hate. And see if it changes your point of view. Or they're going to go the direction of the University of Missouri. And only one type of those institutions is going to be financially viable in the long term.
So I'm sure we're going to get mail saying, you know, Milo's not a serious person, he's a provocateur, which I would say, I could care less. He's got a point of view and he has a right to express it. But I am interested in your response to that criticism because you hear it a lot, that you're not actually making an argument, that you're intentionally trying to provoke the kind of response we saw last night.
Well, my response is, so what? Who cares? I'm an entertainer, I'm a performer, people like, you know, I guess my sort of things are sort of part lecture, part stand-up. One of the things that authoritarians hate, one of the things dictators hate, is the sound of laughter, because they can't control it. They can't control what you find funny. And that's one of the reasons the left is always trying to dictate what humor is acceptable. You know, oh, you can't tell that joke because that's sexist. You can't tell that joke because that's racist. Well, they do that because laughter you can't control, and trying to sort of hammer that down. I'm the worst example for them of somebody who is persuasive and interesting and funny. Every one of my shows is sold out. Every single time I do a talk, people say, I never thought of that. You've really converted me. So that makes me dangerous. Dangerous because my audience is so young, so big, so strong. I'm the person probably that annoys them more than anybody except Donald Trump because I'm effective. And that scares them.
Who, by the way, tweeted about you, I think at 3 in the morning Eastern time last night.
Daddy did. He's got my back.
To say, this is appalling, and to threaten a pulling federal funding from the University of California system, to which the lieutenant governor, by the way, of California did not attack Gavin Newsom, did not attack the mob that set vehicles on fire and tried to injure you, and did injure a bunch of other people, but attacked Trump for threatening the funding.
Well, you know, this seems to be a fairly obvious consequence. If you don't uphold your legal responsibility to, you know, to enforce the First Amendment, you know, to provide speakers with platforms and audiences with safe, the ability to go and listen to speakers of all different kinds, agnostic of ideology, as you were saying earlier. If you don't do that as a university, you're not performing your essential function. You know, Berkeley gets $370 million a year. It is one of the biggest research universities. It's one of the highest ranked research universities,
right.
But it's churning out graduates who don't do very much, because only 47% of their graduates go on to full-time employment when they leave. It seems to me that a lot of that federal money could be repurposed very effectively if Berkeley refuses to honor its First Amendment commitments.
Yeah, for HVAC repair training, I would say. So I want to get to your book. You're traveling the country because you're selling a book.
Well, I'm traveling. Well, I've just started. I think I'm about to switch into the book tour. So Berkeley was supposed to be the last grand finale. My wonderful costume finale was supposed to be the grand finale. I'm now focused. Just smirking at me. I'm now focused on the book, of course, which is rocketed to #1, the Amazon bestseller list when it was announced.
So it's a Simon & Schuster book, and they took a lot of criticism for giving you an advance on the book and for publishing it in the first place. And part of their response was to pledge that the book would not contain what's called hate speech.
Yes.
What is hate speech?
I don't know. I'm probably going to get in terrible trouble with them, but I have no idea, and I don't think anybody else knows either. I mean, it seems to be speech that somebody doesn't like somewhere, a joke that's wrong, some you know, thing that someone offends someone's sensibilities or hurt feelings or politics or something. Certainly, the Supreme Court doesn't recognize it as a kind of speech that should be, you know, treated with any special reference or whatever. Hate speech, it seems to me, has been defined by the political left as anything we don't like, anything that violates social justice doctrine, feminism, Black Lives Matter kind of ideology. It's not something that I have ever heard that particularly effectively defined.
I have literally no idea what it is.
I have no idea what it is.
But because your publisher, Simon & Schuster, has pledged to keep it out of your book, did an editor say to you, here's how we define hate speech, and here's what we're going to be striking from your manuscript?
Again, in so much trouble. I don't know what they mean by that. Look, all I can tell you, this book actually is going to be a lot more serious than people probably anticipate from me. I have my college tour to lob bombs, to be outrageous, to whatever. This book's actually pretty meaty, pretty substantial. It demonstrates a lot of reading, a lot of consideration of the issues. This book is already going to be one of the big books of 2017. It is going to be one of those, a big sort of signature, cultural moment for a particular millennial generation that suddenly woke up and decided that being Republican was cool and was a libertarian, punk alternative choice. I'm one of the people they look up to as a whatever cultural figure. This book actually is much more serious than people imagine. So if you're a feminist or a Black Lives Matter activist who is looking to be offended by this book, you might be disappointed. And if you're somebody who's going in just thinking, oh, this is going to be a load of jokes about his black boyfriends and name calling and fat jokes, you might also be disappointed. This is a pretty substantial book. It's a book that sets out where I believe America went wrong in terms of respecting the First Amendment, the state of free speech on American college campuses and in the media and in academia and everywhere else in American public life.
So we talked about this last night briefly, but you're obviously an immigrant to this country from the UK.
Well, I'm on a visa technically.
On a visa technically. Presumably you came here with the assumption that this was a place where you could express your beliefs, even if not everyone agreed with them.
It was horrifying.
How has it lived up to the billing?
It was horrifying. Honestly, I don't mean to be theatrical, I'm prone to melodrama, but it was horrifying. To come here, land of the free, home of the brave, blah, 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 and for me to do a college tour, to be a journalist here, imagine the Fourth Estate in America. You could be able to say, do, be anything, right? That's what you would think coming from Europe, but we really don't have free speech protections. If it exists, there are rules about it. If it exists, it is regulated in Europe, in Europe, you can get arrested for being misogynist, arrested for being offensive. These are actual offenses. These are things the police can come and take you away for in Europe. As Americans don't really understand how bad it is in Europe. In America, I always imagined that this was a country where you could be, do, and say anything. And what I've discovered, not just in journalism, but also in the entertainment industry, and particularly and most importantly in academia, which is where I kind of try and park my tanks on the lawn and really take the fight to the left, which is why they hate me so much, because conservatives are so spineless all the time. I take the fight to them, and on American college campuses, I have experienced, restrictions on the freedom of speech, groupthink, and penalties, social and institutional penalties,
and financial penalties,
for free expression, like nothing I ever experienced in Europe.
So really, we're almost out of time, but we have guardians of the First Amendment, official ones. The ACLU is the leading one historically. We tried to get Anthony Romero, the head of it, on tonight to talk about this.
Yeah.
He's refused to come on. We also, by the way, tried to get the Human Rights Campaign to come on to talk about this too. But has anybody from the ACLU or PEN America or any people who claim to represent the First Amendment called you to say, we're going to help?
No, of course not. No, of course not, because these organizations have been, have almost completely given themselves over to a particular view of free speech that is hugely restricted and which circumscribes, which cuts out mainstream, ordinary conservative opinion. There's a reason there's a sort of parallel conservative media in this country. There's a reason why there's this extraordinary bifurcation between liberals and conservatives in this country. It is because the establishment, the media, academic and entertainment establishment has made certain sorts of political opinion, respectable, reasonable, mainstream opinion, impossible to express in public.
It's the definition of corruption, unfortunately. We're all going to pay for it. Milo, thanks a lot. That was interesting. Good to see you. Now to the news out of the White House today. President Trump is planning to impose new sanctions on Iran as early as tomorrow. This comes 2 days after National Security Advisor Michael Flynn said the country was, quote, on notice for conducting a ballistic missile test. For more, we go to Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher. Trace?
Tucker, in the wake of that missile launch and Iranian-backed rebels attacking a Saudi military vessel today, President Trump said when it comes to Iran, quote, nothing is off the table. And we've learned the new sanctions you mentioned will be imposed on multiple Iranian entities that are designated as being involved in terrorism-related activities. We're told the new sanctions will not violate the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. And today, the U.S. Treasury Department adjusted sanctions on the Russian intelligence agency FSB, which is the new KGB. Back in December, after U.S. intel agencies said that Russia had tampered with the U.S. election, the Obama administration ramped up Russian sanctions, but it meant that U.S. companies and citizens were no longer allowed to ship technology goods to Russia. That has now been amended. Some Democrats accuse President Trump of easing the sanctions to reward Russia for meddling in the election. Here's the White House.
We're not easing sanctions. The Treasury Department, it is, from what I understand, it's a fairly common practice for the Treasury Department after sanctions are put in place to go back and to look at whether or not there needs to be specific carve-outs for different, either industries or products and services that need to be going back and forth.
The Treasury Department says the adjustment to the sanctions was in the works during the Obama administration. Now to President Trump's contentious Saturday night phone call with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. Apparently, when the Australian PM tried to confirm a deal the Obama administration struck to accept refugees being held in Australia, Trump accused Turnbull of trying to send America the next Boston bombers. Here's the president commenting at the National Prayer Breakfast.
When you hear about the tough phone calls I'm having, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. They're tough. We have to be tough. It's time we're going to be a little tough, folks. We're taken advantage of by every nation in the world virtually. It's not going to happen anymore.
And at the prayer breakfast, the president also defended his order to temporarily bar entry to the U.S. from people from 7 majority Muslim nations, saying he's working to stop those who would do us harm from exploiting our generous immigration system. Tucker.
Thanks a lot, Trace. Up next, President Trump lashes out at Australia over what he calls a dumb deal the previous president made to take refugees. Charles Krauthammer tells us what he thinks. Stay tuned. Well, President Trump had a pretty testy phone call with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull over the weekend. The American president ripped a deal made by President Obama to accept 1,250 refugees from Somalia, Iraq, and Iran that Australia doesn't want and wants to send here. Well, yesterday the president tweeted this: "Do you believe it? The Obama administration agreed to take thousands of illegal immigrants from Australia. Why? I will study this dumb deal!" Exclamation point. Could this be characterized as a blunder, or is the administration just fixing Obama's dumb deal? We're joined now by columnist and Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer, author of the great book, Things That Matter. Charles, thanks a lot for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So fighting with Australia, people say pick your battles. I don't think they mean all of them. So I think you could certainly criticize our president on the basis of that, like why fight with Australia? But the core question is an interesting one. Why should America take 1,250 refugees from Somalia, Iran, and Iraq that Australia doesn't want?
Well, first of all, full disclosure, I'm married to an Australian.
Yes, you are. Yes.
I love Australians, so I'm under some constraints with my dual loyalty. But I think it's a perfectly valid question. You know, the Australians have probably the strictest laws against illegal immigration.
Yes.
They take you to these islands, they're far away. They are not a pleasant place, and you're stuck there forever. So I think it is a question. It's a question you got to ask Obama, of course. Why did he agree to this? And I mentioned this a little earlier tonight, but in September there was a deal in which Australia agreed to accept refugees sitting in Costa Rica. These are refugees from Central America. Now that is very odd as well. Why did that happen? I suspect there's a quid pro quo here. There was some agreement, because otherwise it's incomprehensible.
Yes.
It's not quite understandable. And the other thing is, apart from the fact that it makes no strategic sense unless it was a kind of a deal, we're going to take your refugees, you'll take ours, so it doesn't look as bad domestically. Because remember, for an Australian prime minister, they don't want to violate this sort of rule that anybody who comes to our shores is not going to stay.
Right.
They're afraid that all of Asia, there are a lot of people in Asia, are going to come in boats tomorrow. So as a domestic issue, they can't allow this. So maybe they calculated, if we take Costa Ricans off the hands of the U.S. and they take ours, it'll look better, perhaps. But the other thing is, Obama should not have done this.
Right.
This is a landmine he left behind. On the other hand, Trump was stuck with the landmine. So he had a choice to make. I guess he got upset, and he has a right to get upset at Obama and at the Australians for landing him with this. Because, again, there's no good answer as to why. But nonetheless, he ended up doing the right thing, which was to say, I don't like it, I don't even understand it, but I got to honor it because it's been done.
My sense is that Obama felt that third world immigration into America is just good for its own sake because it makes America better in some way that he was never forced to explain. What I find so striking is this was public. I noticed this when the story broke several months ago, and no one pressed the then president on it. And I think the underlying assumption is that former British colonies have a moral obligation to take poor people from around the world. And I wonder where that obligation comes from.
I think it's larger than that. I think it's first world. You go to Europe, you go to the Swedes, they call themselves the superpower of international philanthropy. They pride themselves. You know, it's a residue of imperialism. We're no longer imperialists. That was a terrible thing. We are now going to be the benefactors of the world. We'll demand nothing in return. In the past, when you're an imperialist, you sat in their countries. You might have, quote unquote, civilized them, but you took all their natural resources.
But wait, there was no more brutal imperial power than Imperial Japan, which invaded a lot of Asia and really messed it up. No one expects that Japan will take any refugees ever.
But the Japanese themselves don't. What I'm saying is the former Western powers, imperial powers, still feel what the French used to call the civilisatrice, their obligation to civilize.
Yes.
And that, I think, persists, no longer in the brutal way, the rapacious way, the way where you took their wealth. But that persists. And there's a sense in the entire West, particularly in Europe, that we have an obligation, sort of, I don't know, because we were so historically lucky that we ended up advanced and they ended up not advanced.
Yes.
And thus we owe the world. You know, perhaps it's biblical in some sense, but it does manifest itself in very weird ways.
Yeah. Charles Krauthammer, thank you. Well, up next, the executive director of the Sierra Club says Donald Trump's cabinet picks aren't just bad, they're an existential threat to the planet. Why? He'll explain after the break. Won't somebody think of the carbon? That's the question being put forward by Sierra Club executive director Michael Brune. He and his organization have opposed President Trump's cabinet picks. Michael Brune joins us from Oakland, California. Michael, thanks a lot for coming on. Let me just say, I've always liked the Sierra Club. I grew up camping in the Sierras. I gave money to the Sierra Club. I think John Muir is really cool. I read your founding statement about protecting and enjoying the environment, and I totally agree with that as a sportsman. But then I see you come out on all kinds of issues that don't appear related at all to me, to the environment, and I'm confused. For example, you all issued a press release the other day saying that President Trump's border tax on Mexico he's going to use to pay for the wall is xenophobic. Now, maybe, or maybe, you could kind of debate it, but why is that within your purview as an environmental organization?
Well, look, it's part of the Sierra Club's job. Our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. And we don't think that separating some parts of America from others is a good way to do that. The Sierra Club stands to protect the rights of all Americans to have clean air, clean water, and a healthy democracy. in order to fight for their rights. If we start to deny a pathway to citizenship for millions of Americans, then those are the Americans who won't have an ability to use our democracy to fight for a better world.
But it seems a little bit of a stretch. But so are you against putting gates on the national parks? Because that kind of divides the country.
Are we against putting gates on national parks?
Yeah, you said you're against a border wall because you're against dividing barriers between places.
There aren't gates on our national parks.
Well, sure there are. I mean, if you want to
fences.
drive into Yellowstone, you've got to kind of drive through a little gate and pay the money and all that. I mean, in other words, protecting the environment sometimes means walling it off from too many people.
Not really.
No?
Not really. There's no gate around Yellowstone. There is a little fence where you have to pay a $20 fee.
That's what I'm saying.
There's not a wall around it.
Okay.
Just like there shouldn't be a wall around our country.
Okay.
Have you been to Yellowstone?
Yeah, I was just there. And you kind of drive through and pay your dough. But my question is, it's a little more specific than that. So, I mean, we can have a debate about walls and xenophobia and all that, but again, why is that germane to your mission as expressed in your mission statement? So I'll give you another example, abortion. So last year on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, you all issued a press release saying that the Sierra Club stands in solidarity, I think I'm quoting, with Planned Parenthood. Now, people feel that way, okay. What does that have to do with the environment? Why does legal abortion make the environment better?
Well, we believe in empowering women's rights. We think that women who have rights and who have the ability to have choice about their reproductive, make their own reproductive choices, will help to produce strong families and will help to protect the environment at the same time. Sierra Club is pro-choice.
But why? I mean, I get that you're pro-choice. That's fine. But that doesn't. What does that have to do with the environment? Like, how specifically does more abortion or legal abortion help the environment?
Well, it helps to address the number of people that we have on this planet. We feel that one of the ways in which we can get to a sustainable population is to empower women to make choices about their own families.
Okay, so fewer people is better for the environment. All right, well, given that's your position, which is a position, then the United States population has pretty much doubled in the last 50 years. It's now at about 225-ish million people. So doubling in 50 years is a pretty quick rate of expansion. Most of that has come from immigration, as you know. So why would the Sierra Club, if it's concerned about population's effect on the environment, and you should be, in my view, why would you be agitating for more immigration?
We're not agitating for more immigration. We believe that the people who are in America should have a pathway to citizenship.
Well, but you're against the wall. Well, sure, but I mean, if they're here illegally, why wouldn't it be better for the environment to make them leave? That would be fewer people. Crowded countries are tougher on the environment, obviously, as you well know. So why wouldn't it be better for the environment to have fewer people here?
Because it's wrong, Tucker. I live in California. I have undocumented immigrants who are on my son's Little League team. They go to my children's school. These are families. These are people who are part of our economy. They're part of our environment. When we go to parks, we play with them. We hang out with them.
Oh, yeah.
These are folks who shouldn't be deported just because of your political beliefs or other people's political beliefs.
No, but I'm not arguing for their deportation. I'm not arguing for their deportation.
We don't think it's good environmental policy. We don't think it's good national policy.
Nothing to do with the environment, and neither does transgender rights. Now, you could argue that it's great, transgender bathrooms are great, and that's legitimate. I mean, I think it's a fair argument. It has nothing to do with the environment, and yet you've issued a press release saying, and I'm quoting, the lack of access to safe restrooms for transgender nonconforming citizens is an urgent matter. It may be. Why is it an urgent matter for the Sierra Club? What does that have to do with the environment?
Again, we think it's the right thing to do. The Sierra Club is the country's oldest and largest environmental organization. We're an iconic organization, whether you like us or not. You used to be a member of ours. Maybe you still are.
Are you even listening to my questions? What does it have to do with the environment? I'm not attacking your position on it. I want to know why it's germane to the mission of the Sierra Club. Can you answer that or no?
I was about to answer it before you interrupted me. I was saying we take a position on the border wall or on reproductive rights. We join the Women's March or on transgender rights because we think it's the right thing to do. Because many Sierra Club members may be gay, they may be transgender, they may be Latinos, they may even be undocumented. We believe it's important to stand up for people's rights so that we can all stand together to advocate for a better environment.
That's fine. Then go work for the DNC, but you're not running an environmental group. You're running a left-wing advocacy organization with every trendy issue gets thrown into the same basket, and it dilutes your mission. Do you not see that, or no?
I most definitely am running an environmental group. I thought that's what we were going to be talking about today. The other issues that we're working on. The Sierra Club is working hard to transition off of fossil fuels, to move towards clean energy.
That's fine.
We've been working diligently and having great success at protecting millions of acres of public lands.
Okay.
We also take positions that our members care about that might not be the traditional issues that you grew up on, but they're important to our members, and the Sierra Club members.
Okay, I'm just saying you're turning off a lot of people like me who care about the environment and want to help. But why would I sign up for this? It has nothing to do with your core mission, and you've hijacked it. And it's just distressing to see that you've done that. I hope you're in.
We're actually turning on a lot of members. We're breaking records about membership in the United States. We're having a surge in membership because of these issues and many others.
Congratulations. You don't have my support anymore. I'm sorry. Thanks, Michael.
All right, Tucker.
Up next, President Trump has made repealing Obamacare one of his top priorities. A columnist says he's making the same critical error President Obama himself made. He joins us next to explain what he means.
Listen, I love Wisconsin. Made in America. Harley Davidson.
That was President Trump meeting with bikers and executives from the Harley Davidson Company of Milwaukee. Trump ran hard on jobs over the campaign, but is he at risk of going astray on Obamacare? David Kuhn joins us now from New York. Mr. Kuhn, thanks for joining us. So you had a really interesting piece about Obama's trouble with Obamacare, and you said basically he squandered his executive capital, his political capital, very early in his 2 terms and was unable to really do much after that. And you're concerned as an observer that this administration might be making the same mistake. Am I characterizing that right?
That's right. Almost every president is overconfident when they assume the office, as they learn too late political capital is a finite resource. President Obama, when he was a candidate, first earned a majority of support after the stock market crashed. So the economic crisis made his majority, made his mandate, and he quickly moved to health care. He threw his political weight into health care, and that was a central mistake of his presidency. And that was, of course, the worst economic crisis in 8 decades, and President Obama pushed to expand the social safety net at a time when Americans were worrying about paying their bills and keeping their jobs. Now we turn to Donald Trump. What is the most central point, the most central characteristic of Donald Trump's brand? Jobs, keeping jobs. Not only does polling show that Trump supporters overwhelmingly, 94% in the Wall Street Journal poll, view jobs, keeping jobs in the United States as the top priority, but it's critical to independents' view of Trump. And if Donald Trump wants to stay true to his base and brand, if Donald Trump wants to utilize this brief period in a presidency where you not only have political capital, but where you can get more change done, I think he should take on the issue of that's true to his brand and to this time, if you will.
I think that's right. As someone who's already said basically he's comfortable with expanding entitlements, or at least preserving them. Really quickly, what does he do if your main goal is to address jobs, job growth, unemployment, persistent unemployment? What's your move? How do you do that?
I mean, okay, so that's a question. So obviously, first you have to balance your constituencies. So Donald Trump has to balance the fact that he has a free market Republican orthodoxy that's his allies, and that he has a Democratic Party that's for and it supports great infrastructure spending. And of course, every fight we've had thus far has sort of separated the parties along conventional partisan lines. For Donald Trump, he really has to sort of buck both party orthodoxies, right? There's a Republican conventional Republican Party that will never back any spending measure that Donald Trump pushes forward. And there's a hard left that will never back anything that has Donald Trump's name on it. Because, of course, they believe in pure obstruction because they're so offended regarding his policies. What Donald Trump has to do is he has to cobble a coalition within both parties, and he could, if he pushed it now,
I think that's right.
that basically pushes forward large infrastructure spending that focuses on jobs and construction and the very people that made his presidency.
I think you're exactly right. It's there. David Paul Kuhn, DPK, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, Professor at Georgetown says white people shouldn't just have savings accounts, they should have reparations accounts so they can repay black Americans for racism. He joins us next to explain what he means.
Did you get hard to lose weight? Contrave is an FDA-approved weight loss medicine.
Professor Michael Eric Dyson has a solution to white privilege. He says white Americans ought to create individual reparations accounts to compensate black Americans for centuries of oppression. Professor Dyson joins us now to explain how that would work and why. Professor, great to see you.
Good to see you, my friend.
So how would this work and why?
Well, yeah. Well, it's in the context, let me just briefly say, it's in the context of a much broader discussion about white privilege, white innocence, white American identity, and it's much more complicated than that, and I go at African-American culture's contradictions as well. And then in the end, when I'm making suggestions about what can be done, many white people approach me and ask me, what can I do? Not in terms of the broad social transformation out there in the world. We all believe in that or argue about it, redistribution of resources or not. But when people ask me, what can I as an individual do, one of the things I suggested, besides being educated, besides participating with other African American and Latino and other brothers and sisters in social movement, is to do something called an individual repair of inequality. And if they feel inclined to do so, this is for people who are so inclined to seek out a way to compensate individually for what they think is a systemic injustice. So I talked about buying kids computers, being able to take kids to school, to tutor them, to be able to do individual things that are tailored to their desires and aspirations, such as becoming professionals, exposing them to things they wouldn't ordinarily see. So in other words, it's a kind of ethic of compassion joined to a sense of conscience that motivates them to do what they're motivated to do.
Well, so I support a lot of that. I mean, I believe in charity. What I don't believe in is collective guilt. And that's why I'm confused by the phrase white privilege.
Well, white privilege doesn't suggest guilt. It suggests responsibility and accountability. The same accountability that America talks to about people pulling up themselves by their bootstraps and addressing their situations, their communities, as being responsible for doing what they're doing. I don't believe in collective guilt, but I do believe in collective responsibility.
Responsibility and guilt are synonyms in this case. And let me just ask, let's be specific. So, privilege. I'm privileged, and I wouldn't deny that, not because I'm white, because I have a good paying job. But you're privileged, too.
Of course.
So we live near each other in a nice neighborhood. You're rich. You went to an Ivy League school, unlike me. And so you're way more privileged than most white Americans.
Well,
so why would they owe
but it's
you
not
something?
Well, first of all, privilege is contingent upon the context in which it's defined. So individual cases could have an imbalance, that people of color could be way more privileged, as you talked about, than the average, say, white person. But remember, during Jim Crow, Jackie Robinson was more privileged than most white people in terms of having the ability to make a good living on a job, but he was still denied access to a water fountain. His kids still couldn't go to the same school. So I'm saying to you that your argument then seems to be rather vulnerable to rebuff, because it doesn't mean economic accumulation can prevent you from experiencing what are essentially racial inequalities. So the amount of money you have doesn't do that.
Yeah, and in 1955, I think that was much truer than it is now.
Well, even now, when we talk about the disparities in terms of people's achievement, a study was done by Diva Pager at Princeton University that said a black person with a college education had less of a chance to get a job than a white person who had gone to prison. So even now, I'm not talking about 50 years ago, I'm talking about this is going on right now. The disparities are very real.
Right. So if I live in eastern Kentucky and I am unemployed, why am I more privileged than you? And why am I in any way, as you put it, responsible for problems of people I've never met on the other side of the country?
Look, I mean, we know that larger forces provide people opportunities or disadvantages. When you come, many people say, let me even stretch it even further. Some people say, look, I came to this country 20 years ago. I came to this country 30 years ago. I wasn't advantaged directly by the system of enslavement that prevailed in America. But if you come to this country as an immigrant and you're a white immigrant and you inherit certain privileges associated with people who are already here, that means that that privilege extends to you regardless of the fact that you indirectly benefited from it and you did not directly contribute to inequality. The Constitution was written a long time ago, so was the Declaration of Independence. But those ancient documents continue to inform people's lives and shape their aspirations.
So let me flip it around. And let me just also note there's a lot of hostility in what you're saying. And I'm sure you'll say there isn't, but obviously there is.
Not at all.
I think it's pretty clear.
It's just it's recognition of the situation. Okay. It's pushback on whiteness that is usually not called out.
Clearly hostile. But leaving that aside, I'll flip around for a sec. If I'm an African immigrant who comes here, I'm resettled from Somalia at public expense, high public expense, am I due these reparations too?
I think that the people who have benefited from systemic inequity in this country have been overwhelmingly white brothers and sisters. And what I'm talking about is a direct relationship to a notable and a documentable and an empirically verifiable system of inequality. There's nothing that's very obscure about that. And I'm saying to you that people of color who are here now, who have inherited that legacy as a result of their black skin and their relationship to black culture, have to be acknowledged. Well, wait, my book is not simply about reparations. You're reducing
I know that it's not, but
so much larger.
It's heavily about privilege. But let me just really we're almost out of time.
It's about white refusal to acknowledge responsibility.
If a majority white country brings in a black African at its own expense, they still owe him reparations for slavery?
No, I'm talking about the people who are here. That's an isolated event. I'm talking about the majority of African American people who are here, who are part and parcel of what this country has been, and who have built it in its institutions to become what it is now.
If you want to know more about this argument, you can read this book, Tears We Cannot Stop. Michael Eric Dyson. Thanks a lot, Professor. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, my brother.
We'll be right back. This is the Fox News Alert. Another night, another attempt to crush speech. Writer Gavin McInnes was delivering a speech, or attempting to, at NYU tonight when a mass of protesters showed up. A fistfight broke out. Attendees were called Nazi scum. Hats were burned. In the video of the event, you can hear glass shattering. Reportedly, at least 4 people have been arrested. We'll stay more on this, and we may speak to Gavin McInnes tomorrow. We're going to try to. Hannity is up next. Don't miss that. Have a great night.